Can't do it. We'll do it live. Okay. We'll do it live. F it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
I love that intro so much. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to the Fantasy Files podcast. We are live. As always, I am your host, Spencer. I actually don't have my things up there. We go. Okay. Yep. I'm your host, Spencer. We got Tim Hardie here, author of Hall of Bones, and RJ Bayley, his audiobook narrator, as well as narrator for many of the books that I love. So welcome, guys. Thanks for hanging out today. We're going to talk about the Kickstarter that just wrapped up for Hall of Bones. Tim, you were on, how long ago was that? Was that a couple months ago? Or
No,
time is a flat circle?
It's not. It's a year. It's over about a year ago.
No, was it?
Yeah.
Was it that long ago?
Honestly, it was, because you were part of my promo campaign plan. Because the campaign ran from, I think, March through to April was when the campaign ran, but actually then getting through delivery, fulfillment, all those different stages, it's literally, I've clicked fulfilled now on everything as of about 2 weeks ago. So that's a year of my life basically on that Kickstarter project.
Oh my God. Time is so weird. This past year has been crazy. Yeah, there's been multiple times. We had Kelcade on, not last weekend, but the week before. And I was like, when was the last time she was on? I was going back into my videos to try to figure it out. And she had been on like 2.5 years prior. And I was like, Jesus fucking Christ, we've been doing this podcast for so long. We're coming up on 5 years in April. In April, we'll have been doing it for 5 years.
Wow.
I'm like, dude, that's so crazy. Yeah. Yeah, it's been wild. We got Spotlight Indie here. 3 of my favorite people. This is going to be good. Let's go.
Aww.
I think this is Holly Tinsley. Does she run the Spotlight Indie account? I'm not sure.
Oh, I imagine so.
Yeah.
Oh, welcome. So Tim, I am incredibly surprised that you asked to come back on, because last time I was positive after the last one you would be like, I had no idea what the hell I was in for. That was crazy. He had all these weird sound bites about alcoholism and harm to babies. Like, what is this?
Are you sure you're thinking of the same episode I'm thinking of? Because I don't remember any of that. I do blank an awful lot of stuff.
Yeah, I think RJ and I got weird on that episode, and then at some point I had a distinctive thought. I'm like, I don't think Tim is used to this. I gotta pull it back. So...
You work with authors, narrators, podcasts, all those sort of people. Funnily enough, your threshold for what's weird, it changes.
Yeah. You
always,
grow and change.
I think I invited myself back on, Spencer, so I don't think you need to have that sense of imposter syndrome there.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I had a friend over here on Friday, and she had never seen the podcast or anything. I had talked about it a bit, but she hadn't like gone and looked it up or anything. And so I was going through some of our videos, and before I did that, she saw the banana helmet on the top of my shelf, and she was like, "What is this?" She's like, "What's this banana thing up here?" I'm like, "What? You don't have a banana helmet? Doesn't everybody have a banana helmet?" She's like, "Why?" She's like, "Why do you have that?" And so I'm like, "Come take a look at this." And I took her through like some of our weirdest Fantasy Files videos. And I'm like, here's the Halloween episode where I'm wearing the banana helmet and sunglasses, and Sam is dressed as Stitch from Lilo and Stitch. I'm like, here's our Vampire Diaries episode where I got like an Edward Cullen wig and the hair is all like floofy and I'm wearing like a pea coat. We went through all these super weird episodes. And she was like, man, it seems like you guys have a lot of fun. I'm like, we try to, because if you just talk about books in the most basic way week after week, yeah, like it gets so boring. It gets to be just the same thing over and over. You got to spice it up with the occasional banana helmet.
Well, but there's your takeaway straight off the bat. I mean, we could probably end it. It's been lovely. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's great to have you on. So what? So you wrapped up the Kickstarter. When was it that you knew that it had fulfilled? Was it close to the end of the Kickstarter, or like at what point did it fulfill?
Oh yeah, let's go poking that trauma.
Okay.
Thank you. So yeah, it wasn't. I'm well aware of where I am in like the indie pecking order of writers. There are some,
sure,
absolutely, they deserve this, but they've got their fan base, they've got their supporters. They put out a Kickstarter, they'll raise $100,000, $120,000, and that,
right,
will just mass and deliver it. I consider myself still to be relatively new on the scene, and we kind of got sort of 2/3 funded. I think when I was on with you actually last time, Spencer, we were mid-campaign. And we were just trying to get those supporters. And they were trickling in. But it was only about 48 hours before the Kickstarter was due to finish that we got over the line, basically.
Wow.
So,
man.
I'll be honest with you, I didn't think we were going to make it until basically a super backer came to my rescue and stumped up. And it wasn't me, just to be clear, and stumped up a considerable amount of cash to get close that final quarter we were missing. So, it was... that was a crazy moment, actually.
That's amazing. I'm so glad that's got to feel good for it to fulfill at the last moment. My roommate just got in, so I'm going to close my door here real quick.
Yeah, no worries.
Can you hear crackling, or is it just my headphones?
A little bit, yeah.
Trying to stop it, sorry.
Is that you, do you think?
Sorry about that.
The crackling. Oh,
yeah, that's got to feel great to get right down to the wire, and you're kind of biting your nails, and then all of a sudden somebody comes in and saves the day, or multiple people do. And that's what I think is so cool about this community, especially with the indie scene, is everybody is so supportive. Nobody wants to see somebody's Kickstarter fail. So like I've been one of those people before where, obviously I don't have like thousands of dollars to donate to a campaign, but I've definitely seen that a Kickstarter is like, coming to a close and they need like a few $100, and so I'll throw like $100 in if I can. Because it's like everybody wants to see each other succeed, and especially me. I made a whole video ranting about this the other day, but I want to see more audiobooks. I think the indie scene needs significally more audiobooks.
Me too.
And
funnily enough,
and so RJ is with me. So whenever I see that a Kickstarter is especially for an audiobook, I try to support that one in whatever way I can, just because I believe in audiobooks so strongly. Yeah, that's great. RJ, what was the other Kickstarter where that happened? Something Lee, you did his book?
Yes, Joseph Lee.
Joe Lee, yeah.
It was Joe Lee, yeah.
That was at the last minute.
The Bleeding Stone. The Bleeding Stone. Yeah.
Bleeding
the Bleeding
Stone,
Stone is what it was, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This first in the I think it's Spellweavers and Gunslingers. My brain is completely fried, I'll be honest. I've literally just finished another audiobook, so my brain fries when I finish the book. So I apologize if I seem like I've been drinking or something. I haven't. It just might appear that way. Yeah. You can tell by the bags under my eyes.
Yeah. So just
right. Yeah. I got my
What
Angels.
are you drinking, Tim?
Just it's a celebratory glass of wine, since this is meant to be a celebratory podcast. So
yes,
I thought if I went to water.
Oh, okay. Because I thought that was water in a whiskey glass. I was like, what? Because that is a very pale whiskey, and I know you like your whiskeys.
I do. But no, I thought if I drank that amount of whiskey on this, then it would get interesting, but for all the wrong reasons.
Right?
So,
yeah. Yeah. I'll drink the whiskey. I have Angel's Envy, and these bottles are usually Angel's Envy is usually like $70 a bottle, so I can rarely get it. And so I found this one, and it was on sale. And it was on sale for like 40 or something, and now I'm kicking myself for not buying 3 of them because they're never on sale.
I don't even know what that is actually, Spencer. I've never heard of that before.
Oh, Angel's Envy? Angel's Envy is really, really good whiskey. It's really it's like really it has like a little bit of a bite, but it's very, very smooth. And it's kind of
it's empty. I can only see a clear bottle.
Yeah. Yeah, I've gone through it pretty quick. It's like usually when I buy a bottle, it'll sit on the shelf for like a while, and I'll kind of pick at it from time to time. But anytime I have Angel's Envy, it's delicious. So I drink it up quick. But yeah, so Joe Lee's Kickstarter had also funded at like it was literally like hours until it had finished, and somebody or multiple somebodies came in and cleaned up the rest of it. And I was following that one very closely, because he would post every day and he'd be like, we're this percentage closer, like we're at 58%, now we're at 62%, and it was getting it was right there, but he needed somebody to like push him over the edge, and that was a fun one to watch. That was really, really exciting. And then of course with Tim's funding, I had no doubt that Tim's was going to fund when we were talking about it on that live stream. I'm like, enough. I've seen a lot of people talk about Hall of Bones. I don't have any doubt that this will get funded. And so, yeah, that was a fun one to watch too. But
it was not fun on the other side of the.
Yeah, it wasn't fun for you.
I think. Yeah, I
was going to say, I'm delighted that you were enjoying it.
At least somebody was, right, RJ. At least somebody was having fun while we were crying.
Yeah.
I think it was a real. I think audiobooks are very hard to fund through Kickstarter, because it was Kickstarter kind of in the sort of writing sphere, and the indie writing sphere in particular. It's about your special editions. It's about getting something physical, and so the audio market is much harder to do on Kickstarter, which I didn't know when I started. But I think what I probably hadn't fully thought through was it's not enough to tell people once about you doing it. And so particularly sort of friends and family, I said, I'm running a crowdfunding campaign, we'll definitely support you. But then they think, well, it doesn't matter if I don't do it. I've got 30 days to do it. So people didn't appreciate the importance of those metrics of actually hammering that first 2 to 3 days and getting well onto because then obviously Kickstarter picks you up and tries to push you over the edge in the good way. But
I was going to ask, is there a bit of an algorithm like when Kickstarter sees that a project is getting funded quickly, does it push that
Yeah,
project more?
absolutely. It gives you the badges and so on. And obviously, if it funds, it then pushes you again, because at that point, of course, they've made their, because obviously Kickstarter take a percentage of what's raised, because that's how the platform works.
Right.
But obviously, the more successful a project is, obviously, the more successful it'll be for them, which is understandable.
Right.
So I think, because I probably didn't quite get my messaging right with people, I think within the indie writing space and readers and all that sort of thing, they understand how it works. But in reality, to get a Kickstarter going, you've got to pull on every favor, every friend, every relation you've ever spoken to, even vaguely. You've got to get a team assembled to everyone stump up the cash and make that happen. And I think for some people, they thought, oh, that's really nice. But if you don't make the target, you don't get any of it. Yeah, I've told you this, but they don't, because it's not there. I'm living and breathing that campaign. Well, it's hanging on for Grim Life, but for them, it's just it's one of about 100 things they might be thinking of. So I think my massive learning experience from all of this was I needed to assemble my team and
ahead of time.
People who would fund, they needed to kind of be on the on the day one bandwagon rather than the day 28 bandwagon when I was in need of resuscitation, basically. So it's lessons learned from that.
Yeah, that's actually good for me to know too, because now when I'm doing these kind of Kickstarter, live events or podcasts or whatever, I'll know now to tell people, like, get in on like day 1 or 2 so that we can like get this push, because I did not know that there was a bit of an algorithm to it. That's real, but it makes sense. It makes sense that they'd want to push it if you're doing it, or if you're getting money quickly, then they'd want to push it more so that snowballs more and more for them. But yeah, okay. So what was the
it's people's full-time jobs to manage other people's Kickstarters.
Yeah. That's one thing. When I was talking to what project was it? Was it the Anatomy of Fear? And I was talking to Holly Tinsley, and she was like, it was like a full-time job, like managing this Kickstarter and trying to make sure that everything was fulfilled and everything. Did you feel kind of the same way, Tim? Was it hard to like write anything during that time? Like, did it take up a lot of your time?
Yeah, I think in it's sort of in waves, really, because I think because I was actually part of the team that helped to fulfill the Anatomy of Fear, actually. So I did some of the electronic rewards. So Holly kind of led on marketing, that kind of thing, and the overall planning. And she got a few people to help out. I decided just to do my one all on my own, because I thought it was actually relatively straightforward to fulfill, because it's all electronic rewards.
Right.
So, for example, people got the short story package. It's just effective to send it out. It's just an email, those kind of things. So it was obviously during the month of the actual campaign and planning. So from like December through to April, when we got funded, basically nothing else happened. The only thing I actually wrote during that period was actually the 4 short stories that made the mini audiobook and the mini short story collection, The Roll of the Dice, which was actually part of the project. And then actually it was, in some ways, it was probably an easier thing to fulfill, in that, obviously RJ had either recorded something for me to send out or he hadn't. So there was actually quite a long sort of like, it was a bit more of an up and down kind of project. So for me, the real push for this, the short story thing was quite straightforward to sort of proof and check off, wasn't it, RJ? But obviously when you're doing a full novel length audiobook, there's a lot more checking that's needed. That's 140,000 words that's been recorded, so you can imagine that takes quite a lot of checking off. So that was sort of in the run up December through to January. That was quite intense, wasn't it, at that period, from what I remember?
Okay, interesting. And did it?
I was trying to get it all done for Christmas, or at least my part, and then so I could send it over at Christmas, and then it was into a fresh new year with the proofing, etc.
Right. How long did the Kickstarter run for? Was that a 30-day thing, or was it longer than that?
Yeah, I went for the standard 30 days, and I'm really glad that's as long as it lasted.
Do they allow you? Did they allow you to do it for longer if you want?
Yeah, I think shorter as well. I think you can run them for a week. up to I think they allow up to a 60-day campaign.
Okay.
But yeah, my experience is very similar to everybody else's. It's busy at the beginning, busy at the end, and it's quite dead in the middle. So you're ticking over like 1 or 2 supporters every day. I just wouldn't have wanted that stress for 60 days. It might have helped with the benefit of that, but I think it would have just exhausted. I think the thing that obviously it's a big part now of indie writing, and lots and lots of people use the and frankly traditional publishers as well. Brandon Sanderson's kind of like the masterclass at this, isn't he? Really, but I don't think anyone that I thought I knew what I was doing because I'd helped Ollie out on The Anatomy of Fear. Running your own campaign is a totally different experience, actually, and it's really mentally draining. At that point, you can't think of anything else. That's me. Yes, you can't think of anything else at all during that period. So I think 30 days is for me is absolutely as much as you should be doing, really.
Right. And what was the initial goal?
God, I mean, it's a year ago, Spencer. I can't remember.
I'm sorry.
There's crazy details. Let me pull up the dashboard. It was about just under £3,000.
Okay.
Let's have a quick look. What did we finally raise in the end?
Yeah, there you are.
3,056. Oh, 3,000.
3,056 raised. Just on just 1%. A nice, healthy 1% over target. Thank God.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's obviously you've got to factor in a chunk of that is going to go to Kickstarter as well. So from that point of view, sort of like gets you the money, but it also kind of squeezes your budget a little bit.
Yeah. So was a roll of the dice, was that a stretch goal, or was that just from the beginning?
No, it was kind of pretty much all or nothing. Our stretch goals would have been to record more of the series. That would have been amazing, but it became quite clear fairly early on that what we were actually pitching for was just to get the book one done and get ready. So, but the reason I put a roll of the dice in, which is it's basically 4 short stories I wrote specifically for the campaign. And the reason I did that, I wanted something new to come out of the project. I mean, I think in reality, having gone through the process now, the audiobook also is definitely new. It's definitely fresh and a creative thing in its own right. But from my point of view as an author, I also wanted something else to spin out from that project. So it was actually when I actually wrote that primarily so that it was possible to support people to support me at a lower level and get something for their money that wasn't, because to kind of make the maths work, you kind of needed to pitch in about £25 for the audiobook, the full novel version. But I knew for some people that would price it out straight away. So I went in with some smaller rewards and rolled of the dice was one of those.
Very cool. And does Roll of the Dice, does that follow the characters that we see in Hollow Bones?
Yeah, with one exception. So one of them is a standalone short story, but most of them, they're very small, 2,000 words or thereabouts. So it's taking bits of history that are referred to in the full series and just expanding on what actually happened in reality, and a couple of bits of backstory from some of the characters you meet in the series as well. So it sort of fills in some gaps. It's kind of designed to be something to either read to see whether you actually like my writing, because obviously that's a very particular taste, isn't it, in terms of what people like or don't like. So it's quite I think it's quite a good intro thing, but also I think if you're a fan of the show, or a fan of the series rather, it shows it just gives people that bit greater insight. So I think you'll get benefit from it whichever way you look at it, really.
Very cool. Well, I started reading Hall of Bones and listening to the audiobook, and it's been
that
great
count.
so far.
Stop
yeah,
it.
it doesn't count. It doesn't count. Yeah,
audiobooks aren't reading. That's not real reading.
Don't you know?
Don't listen to him, people.
It's for idiots.
Right. Yeah, but I'm not just saying this because you're on my show right now, but I'm having a fantastic time with it. It is so good.
Thank you.
It took me probably like a couple chapters to really start like super get rolling with it, but especially I'm not going to spoil anything, but currently I'm in chapter 22, and somewhere around 1920, everything that was kind of going on there, I'll just say there's an old king and some sorceresses, and that whole kerfuffle was, I was like, I am in. This is awesome. And pretty much from really the beginning of that situation, it was so interesting. I wanted to know what was going on. I'm like, what's actually happening in this other kingdom? And it's really got its hooks in me.
Cool. Well, that's what I want to hear, basically. I'm pleased you're enjoying it, 'cause I know you're back with it, so it's nice you're actually enjoying the end result as well. It's really good.
Yeah, it's fantastic,
definitely.
and of course, it's nice to hear RJ narrate something that I'm reading
Thank
again.
you.
I feel like it's been a while, and yeah,
Not in
it's
my
funny.
traditional RP voice either.
It's not what?
Not in my usual RP, like like with Game of Thrones, not Game of Thrones.
If only.
It's because
you are available, aren't you, for Game of Thrones? If that comes on the day, you're doing that.
Spoilers for
if they want
RJ's
to
next
re-record
project.
it, by all means. I wish.
Oh, we lose him?
We lost him at the crucial point there. How annoying.
I know, we lost him at a crucial point.
He's back. Are you back?
Oh, sorry. Am I back again? Am I back?
We can hear you. We can't see you. That's okay. Oh, we lost him again.
I apologize. Yeah, it's because Game of Thrones. Sorry.
I think you're back. I think you are back now.
Have you
Your
got me?
internet
Have
is
you got
doing
me?
some wonky stuff.
They have the
Yeah,
power, you
I've
see,
been
they can
fiddling on my
control people.
phone, trying to reroute power to this laptop, but it no longer, after the update, it doesn't recognize this laptop on my Google Home thing. It has no idea what laptop. It's not showing, so I can't reroute all of the available broadband to this laptop, which is what I would do in this situation. So I apologize.
No, you're fine.
I said that
you're
because
coming through now.
Good. I said that because it's Game of Thrones sounds like Hall of Bones. But what I should, which is probably very deliberate on Tim's part, very nice marketing, well done. But it's because you usually hear me narrating like hashtag handboner and things like that, speaking in quite an arch kind of way.
Right.
And like do it. Is that art? I don't know if that's what art. You know what I mean? Like that kind of superior voice. Whereas, when it came to doing boner, Tim wanted it to be more. We were talking about doing a more northern voice, which is what I've done previously for Lee Conley's Dead Sagas, where I was speaking, leaning more into the Sean Bean of my home city, Sheffield. So I don't know if you've ever heard me narrating in that accent before, Spencer. What do you think compared to my RP or my more Northern English?
I like it a lot. I mean, I think no matter what voice you do, it always sounds great. I haven't listened to Lee Conley's series yet. I keep meaning to, but I just never, for some reason, I've never picked it up. It sounds interesting. I've just never gotten to it. But yeah, let's talk about, what was it like narrating this as, you see the Kickstarter fund. How soon after that do you start recording, or how soon after that do you start planning, or does the planning start before the Kickstarter?
So before the Kickstarter, really, obviously, as I was watching the Kickstarter moving, and it got momentum at the start, and I was like, oh no, I'm gonna have to do this. And then and then midway through, I was like, don't think we'll get there. Hallelujah. And then it picked up speed, so I was like, oh god, all right then.
Here we go.
No, so Tim sent me the again, this is quite a long time ago now, because there's been some ups and downs in my own life that you're both aware of that are quite radical. So yeah, I seem to remember the planning definitely started beforehand. Tim sent me the stuff beforehand, and there was planning about the accents, I think, and where certain accents and what certain places would sound like, because when I get an audiobook and if there's a map and they often are included in fantasy audiobooks, thankfully. I like to try and pin down certain areas, geographic areas would have certain accents, because it doesn't make sense for, say, two people who come from the west of the country for one of them, if they grew up one town apart and one of them's got like an Irish accent and one of them's got like a Brooklyn accent, like, why? Like, that makes no sense whatsoever. So ideally, I like to make sure I get a map and I can plot out with the author, if necessary. If with the author, if the author wants to, great, even better. And we can plot out together what certain places sound like and what accents they have from our own world, and we'll put them on the map and write them in there. If not, then I have done it by myself and worked out where certain places are. But that's an important part of the process. So the planning on that started quite early, I think. And what with the roll of the dice, it was necessary to get certain accents pinned down for that. And then, because there are places in that which are in Hallboner and certain.
Just don't do that, because that's, I don't mind going viral, but not for that.
Hashtag
Hallboner.
Holly Tinsley had to endure it. So we had to. There were certain characters, certain places in that we had to try that would appear later. So we had to nail them down first, and get those done much earlier even than planning for the novel. But by doing that, we were able to kind of pre-plan for the novel itself. So that was an aspect. And we tried certain characters would. Tim thought certain characters might have a German accent, and I'm not very. I can do a little bit of a German accent, but it descends into it can be quite a camp German accent.
Okay.
So even if I try to maintain it seriously, it drifts into so it was necessary, exactly. And when these are
that we kind of realize, to make a creative decision, you think, what, that's a terrible idea. And so we did. Nereth was the character who would have been German, if that had come off. But thank God, we both realised that wasn't the way.
Yeah.
So there was, testing out voices, and obviously there's a huge amount of characters in this. So it was a matter of discussing how I could tackle that many characters at once, while them all sounding reasonably believable. Because I can make them all very distinct. But that means some of them are going to be completely absurd and outrageous, in order to make them very, very distinct.
Right.
So, it was part of it was finding that balance as well about making them distinct versus also maintaining believability in the way they would speak.
Right. Is it when you for the main narrator accent, for the main just the narration part of it, outside of dialogue, do you have a lot of voices to pick from for that, or do you usually have a small pool that you kind of stick to because that's the voice you're going to be using quite a lot more than the dialogue, right?
Yeah. Well, it was really interesting. We did have a discussion about that specifically in this book that's different to the way it's being handled in other books, because some of it was, and I don't think this is too much of a spoiler at all, but some of it is looking backwards as an adult narrator, the character who's narrating it, looking back at his childhood and then as a younger man and then growing up. So
that's the vibe I got.
I'm pleased. So it was to do, we had to have a discussion about, what would the adult voice be like? And then in the dialogue, it would need to go and be a younger version of that character's voice. So, really, now I think about it, some, characters had multiple voices. It wasn't just one voice, one character. It's already a lot. That would be a lot. But this was a case of the lead character needs 3 voices for the 3 stages of his life. In fact, 4 voices, because what I do is I have if it's a character who's the narrator rather than a, not character, I can't remember the correct literary term, but when a character is not narrating it, but when a character is narrating it, I have their voice when they're narrating it, and then I alter it slightly when they do dialogue. Yeah, so when they're talking, when out loud in the world, and when they're thinking. Because obviously you don't have. That's kind of like my way of having sonic speech marks, I guess, so people know what's dialogue and what's not.
Yeah, just a break in there, because I think I didn't have audio in mind. I think it's fair to say when I wrote this book, and I think RJ has done an amazing job.
Thank you.
With the challenges I set him. I think it must be one of the most difficult audiobooks to record, probably beyond. I don't know, Game of Thrones must be up there. And to be fair, Game of Thrones was a big inspiration for Hall of Bones in that respect. So it's a big cast. It's lots of politics, lots of things going on, and a lot of people therefore involved. And I think the other thing that obviously, I don't think it's a massive spoiler because it's kind of out there, and but it moves from first person, the story, into third person at a certain point as well. The first person is what RJ is describing in terms of it's basically Hrothgar's voice because he's the narrator, but then perspective shifts, and so at that point you needed another narrator voice because it wasn't Hrothgar talking, whereas it was Hrothgar talking in the first person. So all those shifts, if you're not alive to them and alert to them, and obviously RJ is, they can really trip you up in terms of how you actually portray the source material. So it wasn't. I've got a question actually, because I've never actually asked you this, but I've decided I think it's important to. Do you have any regrets? Because I hold you responsible. This was your idea. This was your idea in 2022 about whether I was interested, and it was also your idea in 2023 about whether to run a Kickstarter or not, as I recall. So, but do you have any regrets about taking the project on?
Or just do you have any regrets? Full stop. Just
how is it going?
Listen, it's been a hell of a year. No, of course I don't have any. It'd be easy for me to joke, but no, of course I don't have any regrets. It was I love doing it, and it's books like that make me very glad to be doing this job. Like I'm just like, oh, this is the good stuff. This is this is a full meal. Like this is a 3-course meal. Every part of it is rich, delightful. We've got starters, we got beautiful sides, we got the main course, and a lovely pudding. It was really good. So there's other projects that I've worked on that are not audiobooks where I've done I don't think any client's going to be upset by going medical book, medical narration for slideshows and infomercials for pharmaceutical companies, and they can be quite long and involved. They not grip me, and it can be a struggle to maintain that enthusiasm and engagement, not my engagement, but make it so that the listeners or audience might be engaged. Whereas with this, it was like, oh, it's good. Funnily enough, it's the same feeling that I got because I have a podcast called Bailey's Bookshelf, which is an audiobook podcast. And I've just started reading. It's not out there yet, but my next book is 1984. And I just read the first, because I do public domain books and it's public domain in the UK. Yeah. So I was starting reading 1984, and I was like, "Oh, this is literature. This is the good stuff. This is literature." And it's the same feeling I had when I was reading Tim's book. I was like, "Oh yeah, this is good for the soul. This is proper book." Yeah. No, not at all. Also, I was aware that I didn't have to do comparatively nothing really for the Kickstarter. So I was no regrets about suggesting doing that.
Let me put it that way. Yeah, I was a sucker, wasn't I? You just reeled me in. It was amazing to do, and I'm delighted to do it, and I hope we get to do the sequel because it was like such a good
world, and there's so many characters in it, but like each one was distinct. I have a voice bank. I've spoken on this podcast before about how I have a bank of all the voices in for an audiobook project, and then a series, it'll get longer and longer. And I found myself having there's books with far fewer characters I've done where I've needed to go back and remember what voices are. And I was really surprised with how little I had to go back to the voice bank for this to listen to a character again, because the characters are so well drawn and defined and distinct, despite the fact there's so many of them. There's so many competing voices, literally, that like I was really surprised that I rarely had to go back to the voice bank and go, oh, what does such and such sound like? But I think that is also paying off. We did, I think, quite a lot more work than I would do normally with authors or by myself on pinning down what voices would sound like. So I think that also is a testament to the work that Tim put in as well, because it's not just all me doing the work for an audiobook. You got to remember the author, like Tim, has got to, then I send a sheet asking for information, and then they have got to put time and effort in to doing something, to filling all that out. They've got to go through it with me. Like, that is all labor, that they've got to go through it with me and get all the character voices down, listen to it, ask for changes. That's all work. Like, so, it's not just all on me, as well.
I quite enjoyed doing that, actually, because it got me thinking again about the character. I think one of the things that I've really loved about this project has been, get all authors write a book. Well, yes, by definition, all authors have written at least one book. But then if you want to continue in that vein, you've got to obviously write more. And so you definitely want to improve. And I think one of the things, my biggest fear when I was actually doing this project and coming back to it, and it was going to have RJ Bayley literally reading out my words back to me aloud, and me going, "Oh no, it's awful." And I did have, despite having run a Kickstarter for it and made this happen, I had that moment of imposter syndrome that I was going to go back round. And actually, I didn't have that experience. Actually, what I actually found was I fell in love with the book all over again. And your debut always is going to be like, it's going to feel special, but you actually made my project feel special again.
Oh, good. That's lovely.
Too emotional about it. I actually genuinely felt, this is good. I'm really happy with this. You know what? I'm not going to be falsely modest. I'm really, really happy with that that book. Good. And I think your interpretation of it, and you're bringing it to life in that way. For me, it's another level. I think the audiobook is probably my preferred version of that book. If I'm being perfectly
honest. That's a big compliment.
Because
Thank you so much.
help expand it. You helped expand it, you fleshed it out. And I think that decision we made about, okay, we've got the different clans, we're going to have to give them the different accents, otherwise your mind will melt. I had a great deal of fun. so with a huge spreadsheet and all that sort of working those logistics out. But it also reminded me about, I'll be brutally honest, some of the characters I've kind of not exactly, I have sort of forgotten about them because I've written 4 books in this series, and a hell of a lot happens in subsequent books. But, for some of those early characters, and I probably need to keep away from spoilers here in case people say, well, which characters are the ones that don't quite make it through? But for some of the ones that don't, God, it was hard listening to it because I felt them die all over again or have terrible things happen to them all over again. And it was, for me, it was actually a really, really good experience. I really want to do the rest of the series.
Good. Thank you so much.
Do. I don't have a budget for that yet, but if people buy the let's put that out there. So,
let's just handle launching this one first of all. I think you made me realize something as well just then, which feels almost a bit profound to me, but might not be profound to anyone else. I don't pretend to be some intellectual, but because I make crude jokes, but. It's almost like there is a level when, I talk about how audiobooks are a collaboration between the author and the narrator, and that's true. But I almost feel like there is a level of creative collaboration as well. Obviously, the vast majority of that is for the author. But it's almost like you said, like you said you expand the world. And that made me think about there's one character who is associated with crows. And so I made him speak in order, and I took that as an inspiration for his voice, and I made him speak more like and a bit staccato at times, and like a crow, and that was where my inspiration came from. And that was not in the book. Like, it doesn't say his vocal rhythms and mannerisms were crow-like, but I have added that to that version, to the not the original version of the character in the book, but it's almost like a slightly different version of the character in a way, because I've taken yours and then I've like painted certain bits. I've taken that sculpture and then I've painted like there's additional information in there, character information, which is not that I entirely is, you know, kind of my creation. I don't know. I'm not at all trying to steal Soul and Valor, etc. But it just made me realize just then that it's like there's certain information that I've put in there that kind of is about the character and changes the character, you know, adds a different aspect to the character, an additional aspect.
I completely agree. I think there's definitely a two-way creative energy with that, and you were quite at pains at the beginning, weren't you, to talk me through the fact that, you know, Tim, you can't ask me to re-record all the voices when I'm finished, you know, because obviously you have to have that interpretation, and you have to give it, you know, you have to go with what you think is important. I know the character you're talking about. Again, it's a spoiler for Spencer, so we can't talk about that too much. But it gets really good. It gets really good later on as well. But that really threw me at the first, actually, because it was new. I thought, what is that? And then actually, by the end, again, I thought, I know who's speaking straight away. They're distinctive. That really works, actually. And I hadn't realised that was where the inspiration came from, was the crow element. I hadn't quite tweaked that, but now you say it makes perfect sense.
It's so interesting because like some of my favorite audiobooks are like Dresden Files, and then Night Angel, and then King's Dark Tidings and King Killer, two of which are voiced by the incredible Nick Podell. And when I started reading Dresden Files when I was like 18 or 19, same with Night Angel. And at that time, if you wanted to listen to an audiobook, you had to go to the library and rent a CD case, a case of CDs that you would then put in your player. And so I was like, why would I ever do that? And so I was just like reading these books like a peasant. And and I had a very, very different way that I interpreted Harry Dresden's voice. And those are written in first person, so everything is in his voice. And I had a very distinct voice in my head that I heard for Harry. And same with Night Angel, although I would say that the narration for that ended up being a little bit closer to what I had heard in my head. But once I heard James Marsters' voice for Dresden, maybe the first like hour that I was listening to it, I was like, this isn't Harry Dresden. Like, this isn't what Harry Dresden sounds like. And then after I got used to it, after just a little bit, I cannot picture his voice as anybody else other than James Marsters. Like, it is so... Like, he does it so well over the entirety of the series and keeps it so consistent that is how Harry Dresden sounds to me. And when I'm reading it through the first time when I was just reading it on paper, I was experiencing these highs and lows as a reader and these emotional moments. And I was experiencing it as my emotion of what I'm reading on the page. And then later, when I got into audiobooks, I am then, because James Marsters and all of my other favorite narrators are so good at literally acting, like, it's not just like reading the stuff that's on the page, they are acting out these scenes. And because of that, I'm no longer experiencing only my own emotions based on what's happening in the story, but I'm having empathy and sympathy with this person who is acting out these scenes. So I'm feeling Nick Podell's emotions in addition to my own. I'm feeling James Marsters' emotions coming out of the story as well as my own. And so it's such an interesting thing how a good narrator can really change a story and make you see things very differently. There's a scene. My mic keeps dropping. There's a scene in the newest Kingstark Tidings book where I forget what the actual line is, but it's some line that sounds kind of snarky. Oh, it's Rezkin. You don't really need to know the context for this, but Rezkin has a kingdom essentially, and his personal mage, his like right-hand man, finds out that Rezkin has spies in his own kingdom that spy on his kingdom for him, to tell him like what's going on while he's away. And Wesson, the mage, he says, "You're spying on your own kingdom?" And Nick Podell, the narrator, there's a pause, almost like Rezkin is kind of looking at him like that. There's a pause, and he says, "Of course." Like, and he says it in this way, like, duh. Yeah. And if I had been reading that on the page, I would not have read it as this like sarcastic, like, of course. I would have read it, of course I do. Like it, yeah. I would have interpreted it completely differently. And it makes me so happy to have a narrator, because I can still interpret it. I can still like see the words in my head and interpret it however I want. But the narrator putting in that subtle little pause and of course, like no shit, like that. Yeah. That completely changes my outlook on how Rezkin is viewing that question and how he views his kingdom. If it had just been like a straight, of course I do, it would be like business as usual. But with the no shit kind of thing, it's like you can tell that he has more, like he's like, yes, like this is an absolute necessity that I have spies in my kingdom telling me what's going on. And so it really changes a lot about characters and the story and lore in general, for the better. And I think it's so incredible what narrators are able to do sometimes with a story that you would have otherwise interpreted a different way, I think. Yeah.
I think I had a bit of a misunderstanding, I suppose, of what we were creating, because I used to think of audiobooks as quite a passive way of reading, but I actually think now, when you get a narrator that understands the material, like you say, what you're saying, Spencer, they're performing it, and they're adding that emotion and that depth. You're kind of, it actually just adds layers to what's on the text in a way that you don't, you obviously, when you read, it's an amazing experience, but I think it's a different experience with audio, and I think it's far from passive. Actually, effectively, it's a performance, isn't it? Yeah. It's not just somebody reading it out loud, which is, crudely put, is what I thought I was actually getting into, but it's not that at all.
Yeah, totally. And I love scenes where, RJ and I have talked about this before, about like how you perform a scene, because you don't have a camera on you, so you don't necessarily need to show off like a visual performance. But like if a character is angry and they push someone up against a wall and they say, "How dare you treat him that way?" There's like it's, as a reader, it is so gripping, and it brings you into the story so much more to have a narrator who is, obviously, like, there's stuff that you have to do with like volume and stuff, but screaming into the mic, like, "How dare you?" Just like the really like raw. I love that kind of stuff in narration, because it's literally like a movie in my mind. That's how I describe it all the time. It's like it's like watching a movie.
Good. Thank you. But also, it's like, when just going back to the collaboration thing. Also, it's not just me adding flavor to what Tim has written, but like, because we plan it out and we discuss characters together early on, it is, like Tim said, a two-way thing, because he gives me suggestions and says what he thinks a character could sound like or should sound like. And so it's not just me adding me adding information to what he's done with the character, but he also adds information to what I am going to be doing with the character. So there is like reciprocal. There's information incoming to me that I am then. He's using me as the vessel of transforming his written word into the spoken word, and it's not just all on me creating the characters and adding stuff to. Well, vocally creating the characters and adding stuff to what's there. It's stuff from Tim adding stuff to what I am doing vocally as well. So it really is, like a two-way exchange of collaboration. Yeah,
I kind of realised afterwards, because as I say, I was expecting you to do it all in a Yorkshire accent. That's what I was expecting you to come back and have variations on that. Because in my mind, I kind of had, again, Game of Thrones, the Wall, the Night's Watch. For me, it's kind of that kind of setting and that kind of world to a degree. But then, I realised, you were quite right. You said, actually, it's going to be really difficult for the listener to pick out the different characters, and there's only so many Yorkshires anyone can do. So, but I think looking back at it now, what we actually did was we actually overlaid a map of the British Isles and Ireland onto that setting, and that kind of gave it a bit of cogency. So the further north you go, so Spencer, you mentioned the Norhas clan where they are at the moment, for example, that's taking you into Scotland. The Reevesburg clan is in Yorkshire, and then something I never would have considered, but RJ sort of said, well, what about the Burren clan being Essex London accent? And I thought, well, they're going to sound like jokey Cockneys, but actually I think Turfinger Black Eye's voice, he's not in the book a huge amount. But when he's in it, he's really sinister, and it really worked. I would never have thought of doing so. Yeah, absolutely, it was that two-way dialogue, wasn't it? But I think looking back, it's kind of almost like I think again, we've probably taken a bit of our own experience here in terms of the accents that are regional to us. Kind of overlaying it over that setting. It just helped ground it geographically. So if you hear someone talking there with like a minor character who just needs a generic voice, you can still know which clan they're from if you've been paying attention, because you'll know what accent they're speaking with and think, oh, that person must be from the east or the west or the north straight off the bat. And that just provides a whole load of depth that I never even thought we'd uncover with the process. But it was really really interesting to sort of play with that and see how far we could take it.
And with the accents as well, I think it's really interesting that like there's perceptions of what certain accents can only convey one emotion. Like, for example, if you thought like Essex or Cockney accent could only be comical. And obviously I think about accents all day, like it's my day job. So obviously, it's something that goes around in my head a lot, but it's like, well, when you think about like, well, who else has Cockney accents? It's not just like, Barrow Boys, etc. Or it's not just like Del Boy and Rodney. That's definitely a reference you'll get, Spencer, isn't it?
Is it?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
There's a very long-running, it was a very long-running comedy sitcom called Only Fools and Horses over here. Oh, did and Del Boy here is an iconic character, and he's got an accent like that. But also, but when you think about it, I feel like any accent can be badass and threatening, and so they might seem, you first go, okay, that's comical, that's Del Boy or whatever, but then you think, well, also that is Ronnie and Reggie Cray, that is, what do you think of the East End of London? You think cheeky chappy Barrow Boys, but also you think gangsters and stuff, and something that a real turning point for me in how I thought about accents was kind of retrospective, but there is a film which many don't think is very good, but I like it quite a lot, and it's very B-movie stuff, called Solomon Kane, and that's by the guy Robert E. Howard. Is that the right person who wrote Conan? So he wrote two famous characters, Conan first and foremost, but also I think he did Red Sonja, I'm not sure, but also Solomon Kane is also a character that he made, and he's my preferred creation of that author. And he's like it's like he dresses like a pilgrim, but it's in England in I think 1700s or something, and he's basically been damned to hell. for awful things he's done in the past as a soldier, and now the way now he's on a quest to kind of redeem his soul by doing very violent things, which he's good at, but for the right reason. It's very pulp, it's very Conan. But the actor who plays him, and his name now escapes me, but he's James Purfoy. He plays Solomon Kane with a West Country accent. Now you would normally go right what is it? Right, like a West Country accent's like a farmer, all right, my lover, like that. Right. And you would think comical, you would think not serious, no gravitas, like cartoony type thing, but he plays it very down here. And actually, like, and when I heard him like doing Solomon Kane and speaking like that, and like there's a real earthiness and like or lack of pretense to that, like, and it's doesn't care that accent the associations with the accent, because that is not a concern of that character. He doesn't think that way. He doesn't go right. How is my voice projecting? It doesn't matter. So when I looked back at like James Purfoy playing Solomon Kane and speaking like that, like in an accent, and I spent a lot of my childhood in Bristol, which is West Country, kind of getting on for West Country, which has the accent, so I know it well. When I heard him do a badass version of that accent, that totally changed I was like, well, anything could be badass. Like, there's not just, you can't use that accent because it's too funny. It's comedy. It's right. Like, just depends how you do that accent, which was just fascinated me. And that's why it was good to be able to go, right, you could have a very sinister kind of Cockney kind of accent.
Well, again, you worried me because you volunteered West Country, didn't you, quite early on in the discussion?
Yeah.
And actually, so Guttar Valrupsen is quite a key character in the story, and he ends up with that accent because that was sort of that made sense geographically. And again, I was thinking, is it going to be any good? He terrifies me. He's really it's a perfect fit for his voice. So again, it's sort of like. I think that's what I really liked about it. You ended up with quite a multifaceted cast of characters, and you could tell who was who. But again, Gorta's probably one of my favourite voices, actually, and I would never ever have gone that way. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, what's the character in We Men of Ash and Shadow? He's kind of like the Joker. He's described as like being like the Joker.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, he spikes like that, but he's like he's crazy. Like, so yeah, I see what you mean. Definitely. He was like who I kind of pitched as a cross between the Joker and Jack Sparrow.
Yeah, because he's kind of got, because he, like, you could take that accent and make it like a funny, jokey character, but he is so sinister. And it feels that way. It doesn't, like, he does feel kind of like jokey and crazy, but also like very messed up and sinister.
He's loopy. Like, that's the difference between the character in Hall of Bones and the character in The Hand That Cast the Bone. Is the character in Holly's book is like, he's scary in that accent because he's loopy and like he's like, it's very creepy and like, creepy. You could make Captain Jack Sparrow, if you just shifted him over, like his portrayal over by an inch, he would become a very weird, sinister, creepy character. All weird hand movements and stuff. And it's like, is he on drugs? Are you all right around it? Are you all right to leave your children around this man? That kind of thing. Like the child catcher or something from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Whereas with the character in Hall of Bones, I wanted to make him like very like, I'm a businessman and I'm like, don't you see? Like, I'm very reasonable. Like, very, very reasonable. And very, this is the only sensible way of it, don't you? And he's just very like, almost like he wants to be disarming.
Kind of lulls you into a false sense of security.
Like, come on. we're all grown-ups here. We all know that you've not got a chance. Why? Like, no one more has to suffer. And then when it's like, when he's, when certain people might be horrifically tortured, it's like, well, you brought it on yourself. Like, this is, I have to make an example. You were warned. Like, this is you forced my hand.
I can't wait to get to this character. This is awesome.
So
yes,
it's coming. You're not far off.
Okay. What time in the book does the perspective shift? Because I'm not there yet, am I?
No, it's roughly the midpoint to 60% in. So
okay.
Yeah, and for reasons that again are massively spoilery. So you just have to crack on, Spencer.
Does it ever shift back?
Yes, it does.
It does? Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
For reasons which I can be very unspecific about.
Right, yeah. So what's, speaking of, finishing the book up and everything, what are the plans for, do you have any plans for future audiobooks, or are you going to do another Kickstarter or see how this performs?
Again. It's been a bloody
nightmare.
Really? I said before, I'd love to do, Frank, I'm a bit of a completer finisher, so I'd love to do the full series and get that done.
Yeah.
Obviously, that is a big, it's an expensive proposition. So, we're going to have to see. I'm hoping, my plan is to take what the royalties I earn from, Hall of Bones and Roll of the Dice, for that matter, and plough that back into, potentially producing future books in the series. But obviously, there's got to be a market for it. I guess it is a bit of a commercial decision on this one, just because of the costs of getting them out.
Yeah.
You were saying before, Spencer, not a lot of indie books have an audio version. Although there's a reason for that, is because they're expensive to produce, and I think they're well worth. Not just saying this, I think they're well worth the money you pay for them, or well worth the subscription if you're picking them up through a subscription package, and the authors get paid that way. But yeah, so that's my plan. I would love to do them more, but for that, the Hall of Bones needs to be a success, really. So that's kind of the message out there. If you like it, buy it, and more stuff will follow is the basic plan.
Tell your friends.
Tell your friends.
Yeah, tell everybody. Yeah, buy it for them for Christmas.
Don't be one of them people, right? Do not be one of them people. Those awful people who's like, I'll wait till the series is out. I'll pick it up when the series will not be done if you wait for the series to be. You need to buy it so the series can carry on. And that doesn't just go for audiobooks. That goes for when I see people like with authors and they're like at book 1 or 2, and then I've seen people going, I'll wait till they finish the series. It needs to make a return.
How do you think the rest of the series gets made? Yeah. This is an argument that drives me up the wall, that has led to many a Twitter war, where I'm going back and forth with someone,
I've seen
where
them.
It's like someone's like, "Oh, I'll wait for the whole series," and it's like, well, then you're never gonna get it. Like, you're never gonna get the rest of the series if you don't support the first one. If you if you have an idea that a book is going to be for you, and you think that you'll enjoy it, then spend the credit on it. Like, just go drop the money on it. And obviously not everybody is like made of money, not everybody can buy every book, but if you can, and you're choosing not to because of something as simple as, oh well, the rest of the series is not out yet. It's the same thing as like if a TV show comes out, like if it comes out and it's on Amazon or whatever, and it's a really good TV show, but somebody says, well, I want to binge the whole thing, so I'm going to wait until like the first 3 seasons are out. What if it doesn't get renewed for a second season?
Ratings.
Yeah. And then the same people will say, well, if it didn't get renewed for a second season, obviously it wasn't very good. It's like, no, that there's many shows that are very, very good that only got 1 or 2 seasons. But it's just because the viewership didn't show up for it, because they were like, I'll catch it later. I'll catch it when it comes out in like several seasons. It's like,
It's
you're going to miss out
attitude
then.
Yeah, it's an attitude of, I'll let someone else do it.
Right.
Someone else
Exactly.
can do it.
Yeah,
It
crudely
drives me
put.
nuts.
Crudely put. I think you are right. You know, I do get the sort of battered reader syndrome that comes from committing to a series that never gets over the line. I do get that, and authors don't always finish books for all sorts of reasons. Including death and things like that.
Yeah, not good enough. Not good enough.
Exactly. I mean, they should have been trying harder. No, you're absolutely. If you want somebody to succeed, supporting them at the early point in that career and the early point of that journey is the most important time to do it. Being quite serious with it, it is psychologically incredibly draining to write a book you think no one wants to read.
I can't imagine. Like, I mean, not to the same extent, but I go through that on a much smaller level on YouTube, where I'll be making a video that I really like. It's a topic that I really want to talk about. But even as I'm putting 20, 30 hours into editing this video with all of this like footage I'm bringing up on screen or whatever, somewhere in the middle of that, I'm like, I have a feeling that nobody is going to watch this video. Like, I have a feeling that nobody is just going to, like, I don't know. And then of course I do some stupid video about the differences between indie pub and trad pub and hardly do any editing to it. And it blows up like crazy. Some people saying, I agree with everything you said. And then some people being like, you're wrong and here's why. And so it's like that. I feel like the stupidest videos that I don't put like hardly any effort into are the ones that blow up, and the ones that I like put all this love and care and craft into just never go anywhere. I have this video. I've talked about this many times on the podcast, but when Horizon Forbidden West came out on the PS4, I played it and I was like, this is like one of my favorite games ever. I love this so much. And I made this video that I just poured my heart and soul into it. And I recorded like 40 hours of gameplay. And I like scanned through it. Like every time I sat down on my computer, I would scan through this gameplay and like pick little clips and stuff that were emphasizing my point that I was making in the video. And it literally took me like almost 40 hours of gameplay worth of footage, and then probably another like 20 to 30 hours of like editing, putting all the footage together. I think today that video is sitting at 120 views. And so I'm like,
watch that video, guys, for Spencer's own.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely feel you, where it's like, you have this labor of love, and then you just don't know if anybody's gonna pick it up. And it's super tough. And then it's hard for readers like me, where it's like, I have time to listen to an audiobook because I can do that while I'm at work or driving around or whatever, but I don't have time to read on my Kindle. And so it's kind of like, it's like, not opposite for us, but it's like the same kind of predicament, where it's like, I want to support this thing, but I can't if I just don't have time to, if there's not an audiobook. But then on the author side, it's like, I don't have an audiobook because nobody's buying the ebook or the paperback or whatever. And so it's a vicious cycle. And I wish, I wish there was more resources for authors to be able to get audiobooks. Whether that's like, I mean, and I guess like Kickstarter is really that resource that's kind of been popping up in the last couple of years. A lot of people have been turning to Kickstarters, and that's been a good way to, kind of get some funding together for something like that. But
you can obviously you can obviously get things. You can get cheaper voice actors than me, and pay less per full hour. You can get people to do it for royalties, but I think you are making and law of there's the law of numbers. Like, there is so many. there must be. I cannot say that there's not going to be a really good voice actor who's willing to do top-notch sterling work for royalties. There must be. There's got to be, right? Just probability.
Yeah.
But I think the amount of time you will spend going through all of the people who will work for royalty to find one who is up to snuff would in itself be an absolutely gigantic undertaking. So you can get them done for royalties, and I've done it for royalties in the past, but I wouldn't do that anymore. And that's not sorry. I said that with venom, and I didn't mean venom.
No, you're good.
This is what I sound like when I'm thinking things through.
You're good. You're good.
Not saying it like I wouldn't do that shit again. You will, but I couldn't do it. It's just not financially viable for me to be able to do that. Given the amount of work and time that goes into it. So yeah, you can get it done for cheaper, but there's everything that goes with that. Like you're getting it done for cheaper.
I'll just chip in there and say I think it depends on the project as well. So for example, I've written a series at 600,000 words. You know, someone doing that for straight royalties split with the size of the cast of characters involved and all the rest of it, it's setting them up to fail. For me, I that wasn't to inflate your ego too much, RJ, on this podcast. You were my top choice of narrator.
Oh, thank you.
And the reason for that was I had enough people telling me, RJ's done my project, he's done this, he can finish what he starts. Those are all big concerns to me. If I sort of sign away royalty share rights to somebody, I think this is really quite difficult. I'm not sure I can handle it, and then they bail. That's really bad for me. And that would be really bad if I'd Kickstarter funded in particular. So for me, it was definitely worth the Kickstarter route just to get the assurance I got somebody on board who I knew could finish, well, A, start, B, do, and C, finish the project. We're all absolutely essential because obviously that Kickstarter's on me. So, I know it says, we often you give us all this money and we offer no guarantees anything will happen, but that's on me if that fails basically. So it was kind of my reputation was on the line. So he was my first choice, and there was a reason for that basically. So you're doing all right, RJ. You're doing okay.
Thank you. I'll take that. I'll sleep well tonight.
There you go.
Well,
it's interesting to hear as well that it is bad for or you can see the negative side for a author, because from the the narrator side, it's all I've always said to people, look, if you do something for royalties, right, there is the author has nothing to lose. They get a free audiobook out of it. So you will end up working on it. You'll put all the time in or most of the time in creating this project, right? They don't have to, they might not market it. They might not, it'll just sit there. And if it doesn't sell and makes absolutely no money, an author can go, a less caring author can go, oh, well, didn't lose anything, oh, well.
Right.
Whereas you as the voice, the voice actor, the audiobook narrator and the producer often have invested all of that time and money, and then for that not to be marketed or for it just to not work or not, there's no buy-in from the author in a way for them to go, right, this really needs to be a success. I really need to make back my investment. So it's very interesting to hear the other side of that equation where you're going, look, a narrator, if they're not working for any money, they just bail. Like they don't, it doesn't matter. Like they don't have investment. They don't have buy-in because there's not too much dangling on the hook there. So that's great. I'm very pleased to hear that because that allows me to strengthen my arguments, because I'm not really pro working for royalties anymore. In some occasions, by all means, do it if you want to, but I think it's not particularly good, and I think what it does is it can drive down.
I think
who work in the industry.
No,
I think the only situation where it would be viable would be like a big book like Game of Thrones or something with like a name attached to it, I think is I would assume.
A very short book. Sometimes I've done very short books, and the reason is, okay, it's short, it's going to be an hour or two long. That's not the same investment in time. I can do that. I can literally do it in my free time. If it's like if it's for a pal, or
Yeah.
if I'm just like, I fancy doing, you know, I'll never get a chance to do that.
Right.
But also, selfishly, from a career perspective, when you write a list of credits, the audiobooks that are 30 hours long take up as many lines in your list of credits as the audiobook that's 3 hours long, 2 hours long. So it is sometimes, if it's a short book, there's reasons that you might want to go, well, that inflates my credits list. That inflates my number of titles on my credits. So an audiobook narrator can go, look, I've narrated 30 separate titles. And people then don't tend to go through and go, oh, well, that was only 3 hours, so I'm not counting that. That one was only 2.5 hours. That one's out the window as well. And it's like, that was 12 hours. Oh, good.
I tell authors all the time, write shorter books. Write shorter books. Because like Thomas Howard Riley, like We Break Immortals is one of my favorite books of all time. It's big. It's a big book. And he's told me some of the quotes that he's gotten for an audiobook for it, and they are astronomical because it is a big freaking book. And then he tells me that the second book is going to be even bigger. I'm like, Thomas, you are never going to get an audiobook made. You're never going to get an audiobook if you keep making these big ass books. And yeah, it's a bummer for readers like me, because I would kill for an audiobook of We Break Immortals. But it's so expensive and it's so long that of course you have to pay for that amount. But
the prevalent, like not the common wisdom, I don't know what expression I'm searching for, but I've heard it said, many people have said, if you do a long audiobook, people are more likely to buy it, apparently, because they're getting more bang for their buck. Like often when it's a credit. And so you'll see like all adverts on Facebook I've seen where it'll go the entire series, 68 hours of audio for only one credit. And yeah, I can see an appeal in that. You're like, that is like, if you're just clinically going, without any kind of like appraisal of what the level of art might be, if you're just clinically coldly breaking down, right, I get such and such hours of audio per one credit, which makes that one better for value in cold, raw numbers, like running time. Whereas like I put like, that's a lot of people have said that and like going, longer audio, longer royalty, if you're going to do it, maybe do a longer one. But personally, I'm like, often I look at an audiobook and I'd love to read like the Once and Future King, but I look at that and it's like, I don't know, 40 hours or 30 hours or something. And I'm like, I don't know. I think there's got to be, if it's me alone, there's got to be people out there who look at a really long running time and they go, oh, like you, Spencer, who's like, oh, that's a big ask. That is a big ask. It's like sitting down to watch the Godfather Part 2 or something. Incredible. When will you go, oh, I'll rewatch the Godfather Part 2?
Right. Yeah, I have a rule. If it is under 10 hours, then I do not spend a credit on it. Right. And I'll wait for a sale where it goes below $10 to buy it, because I'm like, at that point, because I listen on 1.5 or 1.4 or whatever, and so at that speed, I'm getting 6 or 7 hours of audio for a $13 credit. So it's like 2 hours or $2 an hour. And so if it's really short, unless it's something I really like, unless it's like one of my favorite series, like Dresden Files or King's Dark Tidings or something, then I usually won't spend a credit on it. But also on the flip side, if it is over 30 hours or really over like 27 hours, then I'm kind of like, I don't know. That's going to take a long time to read. And I'll still do it, especially if it's something I really want to read. Like if it's like a Sanderson book, or if it's like they've never been this long, but if for some reason a Dresden Files book was that long, then I'd do it. But yeah, if I see that it's super super long, then I'm usually hesitant not to like spend the credit on it because I think the credit is worth it for that much audio. But I am hesitant to pick it up just because I'm like, will I be able to finish that in time for the podcast, or will I be able to read that in between the other things I'm reading?
People are getting busier, and that's like, again, why audiobooks are always, if you look at the figures, audiobook sales are always going on year after year on year. And I wonder if that's the same thing, like people are living busier and busier lives. So like a shorter book is appealing to a lot of people like myself, because you're like going, right, I'm going to dedicate a lot of time to finishing that story. Whereas I know, like, my two favorite books of all time, no offense, Tim, are The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells and I Am Legend by Richard Matheson. I think Tim can probably cope with that.
I'm all right with that. Carry on.
Yeah. And those books are like not long books at all. I read I Am Legend in a weekend, and it was all the better for being such a condensed, short, intense experience. And I remember where I was when I read the closing lines, those just amazing closing lines of I Am Legend. At the end, I remember being on the train reading them like that, like absolutely incredible. And to that end, in Uncharted 2, to that point, Uncharted 2 was, until recently, until I played BioShock, my favorite game of all time. And that was, again, I just sat there for I just did it in a weekend, just had the most intense, short, condensed, immerse myself in it, just smash through this one game in 2 days. And I was I still treasure that whole experience. And that to me is much better value and memories. The fact that I paid X amount of money for a game and did it in 2 days. Some might go, yeah, you want to stretch it out, mate. I would not have enjoyed it as much.
I love shorter games as well. I'm playing through Dragon's Dogma right now. And it's like a big open world RPG, and I'm like I've done like a shit ton of quests, and I've been all over the map, and I'm like level 39 or 40 or something like that. And I was like, I've got to be getting close to the end. I've put like 50, 60 hours into this game. And I was on YouTube, and there was some guy that had gone live, and he was playing Dragon's Dogma, and I was like, oh, I wonder what's going on in his game. So I clicked on it, and I see him. He's in like this very different place, and he's got very different armor. And he pulls up his character screen, and he's level 93. And I put into the chat, I'm like, wait, how long is this game? I'm like, I said, I'm level 38. How much farther do I have to go? And he like reads off the comment, and then he just starts laughing, and he goes, oh, you'll see. I was just like, fuck.
With Red Dead Redemption 2, I love Red Dead Redemption.
Dear God,
incredible, right? But their marketing campaign backfired on me, because they were like, this is the biggest open world this is the biggest game ever. And I was like, I'm out then. That's too big for me. Thank you very much. I can't touch it.
It's not a selling point. It's not a selling point.
What do you like, the short books, Tim, or how do you feel on
It's interesting. I mean, I don't have time to play computer games because I'm writing, so I had to make certain sacrifices in terms of what I did didn't do in my spare time. But it's interesting hearing that discussion, actually, because I'm thinking going shorter with books is the way as well. In terms of my own creative energies experience, I didn't sort of set out with a word count for something like Hall of Bones. I just wrote it, and that was how long it was. And that just seems to be roughly how long every other book was in that series. But
what is the word count?
So Hall of Bones is around 140,000 words.
Oh, okay.
And then I think Lost Gods the third book comes in at around 180, but the others are all around that 140, 130,000 range. It gets you about 600,000 words in total, which is still quite chunky. You know, it's sort of on the epic fantasy, but not quite trying hard enough kind of level. My current project, I'm trying to get that to a book of about 90,000 words, and I think that might be the sweet spot. I think for those reasons you mentioned, that people are busy. You know, you want it to be long enough that it can be an experience that they remember and get into. But like you said, RJ, you can have that experience with a really, really short book. One of the best books I read recently, Your Blood and Bones, is a novella by J. Patricia Anderson, indie author. It's only a novella, but that book just really stuck. Again, similar to you, it was short. I remember where I was when I read it. I was on the plane, sort of flying back from holiday and stuff, thinking this is absolutely brilliant. And so yeah, I think it's more about the immersive experience. And sometimes you just have to say, okay, that's good enough, and let's wrap it up, rather than going on, you know, expanding out. And there's also a commercial side to this. Obviously, ebooks can be as long as you like. No, it doesn't really matter. But from a print point of view, obviously, print books getting more expensive. So if I publish basically a big chonker, I either have to
print
price it high to make a return, or I make nothing on it. And you know, again, I didn't really understand the whole print versus royalty kind of equation on my series for a long time. Actually, I realized I was selling Hall of Bones and making, like, for a paper, making 45p. It was crazy. So
I think it also comes down to, like, I think, and this is just from a reader's perspective, obviously I'm not like an author or anything, but I get the vibe that a lot of authors have this story in their head, and they want so badly to pack as much into one book as they possibly can. And it becomes like this big long story, but then there's some chapters and stuff that are just kind of, maybe not filler, but like where just like nothing is happening. And obviously you have your slower stories and you have your faster paced stories, and that's totally fine. But if you look at something like Night Angel, those books are like that little box on my shelf, that's all 3 books. And so they're only like that big, maybe not even that, maybe like that big. And there is so much that happens in that trilogy. When you finish that trilogy, you feel like you have gone on this huge epic fantasy adventure. You've seen the entire world of Night Angel. You've learned about all these myths and legends. You've gone to fight like ancient enemies from the depths of the earth, and like all of these like crazy things have happened. You've had these amazing character moments with all of the characters, but they're so short. And it's because Brent Weeks, you know, you can hate Brent Weeks, you can love Brent Weeks, whatever, but he has a way of packing so much information into one book fluidly in a short book. Like those audiobooks, I think, are like 15 hours. Maybe the third one is a little bit longer. But you know,
you just say short? 15 hours.
Do you mean for all 3?
No, that's one book. I would consider a 15-hour book a short book.
Yeah,
you're mad.
A short book. Yeah.
For me, it's eight. A short book for me is 8 hours. That's an 8-hour book is a short book for me.
Yeah, for you, because you're having to do the work on it. I'm just sitting and listening to it. That's 2 days of listening for me. But then the interesting thing is when you get to Night Angel Nemesis, it's that white book on the shelf. That's as big, if not bigger, than Riley's book. And in that book, I liked Night Angel Nemesis significantly less than the original trilogy, because there's so many scenes where it's like, did we need this scene? Did we have to go back over this scene? Did we have to include this? It also kind of seems like a rehash of an earlier scene, and it's kind of all over the place. Like I liked Night Angel Nemesis simply because it was more Night Angel, but I don't think it was like a super well written book. And so, you know, you see the difference between the two, where the first trilogy, super fast paced, things are happening, but you're still getting these really deep and meaningful character moments, to where in the third book, you are crying over some of these characters that are dying or maimed, or their life is changing forever or whatever. but somehow he's able to pack that into, you know, a significantly smaller book.
Yeah. I think that comes a bit with writing experience. I'm not saying Brent Weeks didn't know what he was doing with that later book. Yeah, I think
Sure.
there's obviously choices you make as a writer, what type of story you're trying to sell. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes you want to be fast paced. Not every reader likes that. So a lot of readers like to actually spend a lot of time in the world. And you know, I was reading J. Hannaford's Gates of Hope. You know, where that is basically just a love letter to that fantasy world. And you know, frankly, not an awful lot happens in that book, but it's got legions of fans because they love immersing themselves in something that actually feels more like a slice of life, probably the opposite to what you've just described in terms of like those really quick sort of more action filled kind of stories that people like.
And if you love a word,
sorry, I was going to say,
no,
I think
you go on. I'm very rude.
no, it's fine. No, you're not at all, but we're very British and we're allowed just apologize for the next time. So I think, but I think with my early writing, I simply put down what ideas I had in my head. Bang, they're on the page. There you go. And for good or ill. And I think with this latest project, I had about 4 strands in my new novel I'm writing now. And I realized one of them wasn't helping me tell the story. So I think if I'd been, you know, 2015, Tim, I would have simply written that and it would have been probably 120,000 words. By taking that decision to take that bit out of the story, it's 90,000 words. And I can still use that idea, but I realized actually that's not a book 1 part of the story, it's a book 2 part of this story. So I think with writing experience, you start to learn, you can't please everyone all of the time with the decisions you make, but I think you should be more conscious on how you tell a story and what adds value to that tale and what doesn't. And I think that's a bit I'm trying to learn now in the sort of second bit of my sort of, I suppose, a new phase in writing, really, for me.
Yeah, I appreciate that a lot because I think, you know, not only it's got to be a tough balance for an author because you have these characters in your head, you have the story in your head that you really want to tell, you really want to get out there. But at the same time, the book needs to be marketable, first of all. But it also needs to kind of respect the reader's time. And there's been certain books that I've read in the past where, you know, specifically what you mentioned, where this one story thread was not getting my readers from A to B. Like, it was not helping them understand the other 3 threads. And it was there as kind of a sideline thing. And I've never been more aggravated at a book when there is just like a storyline that is not doing anything. And I get to the end of the book and I'm like, so what the fuck was all of that about? Like, why was that here? And I feel like I like almost wasted my time with those chapters. And I think that's super important to think about, like, you know, what needs to be there and what doesn't. And on the one hand, it's, for me as a reader, like, if, you know, whatever the new Dresden Files book is, you know, whatever he wants to put in that 17th or 18th book or whatever, I will eat it all up, and the more he can give me, the better. But it took him 17 books of getting to the point where I trusted him as an author to just be like, I'll read whatever you give me, whatever you want to give me, I'll read all of it. And so I think it takes a while for readers to get there.
Yeah, I've heard of like people, I think it was Game of Thrones someone was talking about. I've heard of people being like, they're reading Game of Thrones. And to me, this is horrible, but like sacrilege. But they'll be like, oh, this is a I don't know, Robert Baratheon chapter, and they just skip certain characters because they're not interested in their story. So, and they don't find them entertaining. So they'll just like, oh, this is a such and such chapter, and I don't like that plot line. So they just like skip it and go to the next chapter and don't read those particular chapters, which is horrible, in my opinion. Like, it just feels so wrong. But yeah, that's exactly what it is about, you know.
Yeah.
Not shaving it down to its you know, to something more palatable, I suppose, for people.
Speaking of which, I was one of those readers one time. Despite, I love grimdark. Like, grimdark is like my favorite subgenre of anything. And for some reason, I have never been able to get into the First Law. and I can recognize that Joe Abercrombie is an amazing author. He's very, very talented, but for whatever reason, I didn't care about Logan Nine Fingers, and I definitely, at least at first, I didn't care about Glokta. And I was reading through that first book, and I went on to the First Law Reddit, and I asked.
Oh no! What did you do?
I was like, this was like years and years and years ago, and I asked, can I skip Glokta's chapters and just read the other ones? And I got like blocked or something from the Reddit. People are like, they're like, you need to leave right now. And I got nothing. I don't know what I was expecting. I was much younger, but they did not like me asking if I could skip Glokta's chapters. And later, I think it was in the second book where I actually started to like Glokta. But at first I hated him as a character. I'm like, I don't want to read about this weird torturer who like can't get around and like has no like forward mobility in the story, at least at first. So yeah, that was me once upon a time. I've never done it again though.
Yeah, I think pick your audience there, Spencer. And I think you picked the wrong one there.
Yeah.
As long as you've mended your ways, then it's fine.
Yeah. I mean, there's certainly chapters where I wish I could skip them, but I know that at some point they're going to be important as long as the author is doing their job relatively well. I will say, as far as like pacing, what we were talking about earlier is last year I read the first two books in the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb.
Yeah.
And that, along with Kingkiller, is a really interesting series of books because it is slow paced. It is kind of on the longer side, I guess. It was probably around, the audiobook I think was like 27 hours, 28 hours. It was longer and it was slower, but every scene felt like it needed to be there. And I think that it's got to be a hard line to walk for authors, because I'm sure as an author, you look at your work and you're like, well, yeah, every scene needs to be here. Like all of these scenes that I've written for a reason, and they're here for a reason. But from a reader's perspective, it's more of like a feeling rather than like an intellectual, like, this scene is here because this happens later, because I don't know that yet, right? So every scene needs to like really engage. It needs to really like click in. And that's something that I think that Robin Hobb does really well, where it's like, yeah, every scene is very slow. Every scene is like very slice of life. It's Fitz kind of walking through the castle, or hanging out with Molly, or meeting up with like Verity or the king, or the other who's the actual assassin? I forget his name. But
Shade, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And all of these scenes are very slow. A lot of it is like discussion. It's not a lot of like action, or even a lot of like immediate political maneuvering. It's a very like slow game. But every scene is so engaging. Like every scene just like sinks into the marrow of your bones, and it's just like, you just want to live in that scene. And I think that's kind of what makes the difference. And it's the same way with Kingkiller, where every scene is just so, you just want to live there. And I think that's the difference between a good slow book and then another like slow book that's just very like, can we get on with it?
It's purposeful slow versus just slow. It's interesting you mentioned Robin Hobb, because she is like one of the most influential writers in terms of my own fiction, actually. So
nice.
So yeah, there's quite a lot of nods in Robin. So I tend to talk about the my sort of like the Viking series as being very much, Vikings TV show meets Game of Thrones, but actually probably the strongest influence kind of running through that is actually Robin Hobb. And I've not read her books probably now for about, it must be about 12 years. I picked up and read that Farseer trilogy, but I still remember those books. And the reason why is because what you've just said. It's actually every scene had a purpose, every character had a part to play, and it's just masterful storytelling. When you're that good, you can take as long as you like,
Right? Yeah.
Everything you write is golden. I'd love to be that good.
Well, yeah, I mean, and going back to Hull of Bones, that's one thing that I loved about the beginning of it is like it is slow, and we're watching Hrothgar, is that his name?
Yep, that's right.
Okay, Hrothgar. We're watching him like grow up and kind of how he fits into the hierarchy of like his father and his brother and all of these other people around him. And you're learning that he will likely never be, or at least as far as what I know right now, is he will never be the leader of this, area, this region, or tribe or whatever. And you're kind of seeing him in his everyday life, but it's really interesting to follow because he's got really cool interactions with his brother. Like he's really devoted to his family despite not wanting to marry how they want him to marry, and him going off with Destra, that's her name, right? Destra?
Desta, yeah.
Desta. And, I love all of that. It very much reminded me of like Fitz and Molly, where he's like, he's kind of expected to marry into nobility, even though he's a bastard, but he wants to marry Molly. And that's kind of what Desta and Hrothgar felt like. And I'm just like, Tim, you better not fucking do anything to her. I swear to God. Like, better not have anything bad happen to her.
It's a lovely tale, and it all ends happily.
Everybody's very happy, and all ends well.
There's no conflict whatsoever.
Yeah. But yeah, that was
that fashionable genre of like cozy fantasy at the moment. That's what
right. Yeah, it's at the top of the bestseller lists of cozy
Legends
fantasy.
and Lattes is very adjacent to
to Hull of Bones.
Yeah, absolutely. Readers, fans of that will lap this up.
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
that's irony and a joke for anyone watching that gets confused.
Yeah. But yeah, the thing that did grip me at first was this life in his village and all of the stuff with Desta, and kind of like sneaking around with her, and like the love that they share, and then kind of the camaraderie that he has with his friend starts with a B. I'm forgetting.
Sandor. Yeah,
yes.
Right. There's a huge cast. You're excused.
Yeah.
Yep. I struggle.
Yeah,
I don't remember any of the names.
Honestly, I
could.
Yeah.
I was like, it's like I just am overloaded the book, and now I'm like, I can't even remember the protagonist's name.
Right? Yeah. But yeah, I love how all of that kind of, and all of that is still there where I'm at in the book, but I like how that shifted into the bigger plot of going to this other area to possibly, marry someone off, and so that. I feel like it led really smoothly into like the bigger plot of the book, and so yeah, I definitely see the Robin Hobb inspirations there for sure.
That's nice to hear. Cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, is there anything else that we want to talk about before we kind of wrap up for the day?
God, I think the most important message I've got is if you want more audiobooks, then buy the first audiobook and more will follow. So I think that's the key message I've taken away from today's discussion.
Yep. Buy the first audiobooks to support the authors. And then also in my recent video, I said and obviously I can easily say this, and it's harder to do in real life sometimes, but I said in my recent video for authors, I'm like, save up for an audiobook like you would save up for a car. Like I have a tattoo fund, and I put $100 or $200 from every paycheck in that tattoo fund so that I can eventually get, a $1,500 like awesome tattoo down the road. And so I think, I think it's easy to see, the big sticker shock of an audiobook and be like, well, I can never do that. But the rest of the world is like that too, like buying a car or buying, all of these other, like buying a new Have you seen how expensive TVs are now? They are so ridiculously overpriced.
Crazy. People should read and just enjoy audiobooks. It's not even worth it. Not even worth it.
So, but yeah, so everybody go check out Hall of Bones. It's available on Spotify, right? That's where they can for sure buy it right now.
Yeah, so Spotify, Kobo, iBooks, or basically it's gone wide. Yep, that's it. Anybody that sort of sells books, audio or otherwise, will be selling this. The only one that's actually slightly lagging behind is Amazon themselves. So although the ebook and paperback's already on there, their I think quality control process takes a hell of a lot longer than apparently every other retailer on the planet. So I'm effectively going to have to separately launch it, I think, when it comes out on Amazon, but it will be there too eventually.
They're a small company. You have to give them some slack.
Right, small businesses, right. No, we were talking about this before RJ hopped into the call. Have you noticed this also, RJ, where Amazon, for whatever reason, will just take like weeks and weeks and weeks to upload an audiobook? Like there was some other book that I saw recently.
Okay, right, yeah, okay. Actually, I was going to say I never upload stuff because send it to. I'm not the uploader.
Right.
But yeah, there was something where, like, with A.K. Faulkner's one of their books, and in the Inheritance series, and I was like, why haven't they uploaded it? Like, this has been like 7 months, and I think I want to say it was like 7 months.
Tim just lost his soul.
Yeah, sorry. I don't even know. I think it was something like 7 months, and it was just like,
so crazy.
What's going on? Why?
Oh my god!
Where is it? No. So,
but
that was a one-off. Don't worry.
Yeah,
that was weird.
Why would you end things on such?
As soon as Amazon were prompted, they did look into it, and they got it moving. So don't worry, it was fine. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think basically, it's on plenty of different platforms, and I think a lot of people are going to, access it more than one way. So, whichever way works for you, go and find it and pick it up.
Very cool.
Yeah,
very cool.
I echo this.
Any final thoughts from you, RJ?
Buy it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
All right.
We could have led with that and not been the whole podcast.
Yep.
Buy audiobook Hall of Bones. Also, if you like it, then hire me.
Yeah. Hire RJ.
I can recommend RJ, and he's not paid me to say this. The other thing I would also say is, if you like it, review it, because on some of those other retailers, it's still obviously sat there with 0 stars and all the rest of it. Just stick a star rating up. Well, not 1 star, obviously, because that would be terribly rude.
Yes.
4 or 5 stars, very welcome indeed.
Yeah.
Anything like that just helps give people a bit of confidence to buy, because I think, again, with indie in particular, early reviews, those kind of things, and ratings, they really massively affect you psychologically into what you see on the page. So if you think it's a waste of time, it's not. So if you liked it, stick a review on, or at the very least give it a star rating. I'd be very grateful if you did that.
Yeah, me too.
For sure. All right. Well, we are going to wrap it up there, everybody. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. If you were here live and listening to us and hanging out, or if you're watching this later, thank you so much. Leave a comment down below and say hi, or, let us know what you think of Hall of Bones if you've read it or if you're planning on reading it. I'll have links to the Hall of Bones Amazon page. I'll make sure to put the Spotify one up as well, because I don't think I knew that Amazon didn't have the audiobook yet when I started this thing. So I'll add the Spotify link in there, and I'll have the rest of Tim's links, RJ's links to Bailey's bookshelf and his website and all that. So all of that can be found in the description if you would like to interact with them more or buy books or whatever. But also our links are down there if you'd like to follow us on Twitter. I refuse to move to Blue Sky, so for now it's just Twitter. I'm sorry, everybody. I've gotten so many people saying, I'm leaving Twitter, come find me on Blue Sky, and I'm like, I guess we'll never talk again, bye. I'm not going over there. So yeah, you can find us on Twitter. We got our Discord link down there. Then we got our Patreon if you would like to support us over on Patreon. We've gotten like a crazy amount of new patrons over the past couple weeks. I have been so happy. Like we've literally gotten 4 in the past week, an extra 4 people.
Amazing.
And it's been so cool. And I think it all stemmed from our interview with Kelcade, because I went on to the King's Dark Tidings Reddit. And I was like, hey, we're interviewing Kelcade, and there's like no King's Dark Tidings content out there, but there's a huge community for it, like a massive KDT community. And so whenever we upload a King's Dark Tidings video, it gets crazy views because nobody else is talking about it. And so I was like, we have an exclusive interview with Kelcade. It's coming up. You can either wait for it for a couple weeks to come out on YouTube, or you can join us live if you go on Patreon. And we just had like all these people come into our Patreon.
Amazing.
So that's been great. They've been sticking around and hanging out.
A lot of Patreons, yeah.
So that's been great. So thank you to all of you guys, and the people from last year, from 2024. They helped Gabe get a new studio microphone. All of the money that you send us over on Patreon, it all goes to equipment and making the podcast better. It doesn't go like directly into my pocket or anything. So it's been great to get little upgrades here and there. But with that,
also there would be nothing wrong if you did pay yourself from it. If you were making a living from this, there's nothing wrong with that. You shouldn't feel bad for it.
Sure, yeah. If we ever get like super famous and we're making a lot of money, it's like, yeah, I'm taking it to the bank. But all right, yeah, we're gonna wrap it up there. Thank you everybody for hanging out with us. Go check out Hall of Bones. Go check out RJ Bayley's pages, Bailey's Bookshelf, and his YouTube channels and whatnot. Go check all that out, and we will see you in the next live stream. Bye, everybody.
Brilliant.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.